My name is Mark, and I own a pumpkin farm with my wife for over 20 years now. It's been our seasonal business for a while now, and we'd be open the whole month of October into November for pumpkin picking. Overall, it's a really cool side job for us where we also made decent money doing it. We live in a small town in Vermont called Woodstock, which is a great spot for people to go pumpkin picking during the fall season. It's a place many have never heard before, as it's hidden in the hills of the state. It has a population of around 3,000 people, and we've been the happiest we've ever been living here. This happened just a week ago during the beginning of October. Ever since the pandemic, we'd seen more people visit this year than any other year, and business was booming. This is how my wife and I made a living, and seeing the joy of families picking and carving out their pumpkins really made us smile. One night on a Wednesday, we had closed the pumpkin patch as it was getting late and people were starting to head home. My wife had helped me clean up any trash left behind while I locked the gate and turned on the cameras. After that, we had made some dinner, watched a movie, and decided to call it a night. At around 8 p.m., my wife and I got ready for bed so we could wake up the next morning to open. I had to get up at 9 so we could open at 10, so that meant I had to get some decent shut-eye. That being said, I fall asleep and get some rest for a few good hours when I was awoken by my wife. She's shaking me, and when I wake up, she whispers something along the lines of, "Honey, get your gun. Someone is walking around outside the farm." At first, I was trying to process as to what was happening, but when I snapped into reality, I knew she was serious. I put on my glasses and boots and take a look outside to see that there was indeed someone out there. However, they didn't appear to be violating anything or stealing anything. They were sort of just walking around observing the pumpkins. The thing that confused me the most about them was the way they walked. They appeared to be sluggish and sort of walked lazy and tired with an odd forward stride. I didn't know if this person was drunk, in danger, or dangerous, so I grab my gun and storm out of the front door and tell them to leave the property. They then stop in their tracks and slowly turn towards me and proceeds to make this screaming noise. It was unlike anything I've ever heard. It sounded distorted and high-pitched. In fact, it didn't even sound human. That's when I see this so-called person literally trapeze across the farm, disappearing into the night. All the while, my wife is asking me who the hell was that, to which I told her I didn't know. I didn't bother calling the sheriff, as I had just thought it was some drunk teen from a Halloween party or something. However, the story doesn't end there. The next morning, my wife and I had got up and got ready to open when I noticed that some of the pumpkins had begun to fully rot. I didn't understand as to how that was possible, as these pumpkins were in perfect condition just yesterday. Needless to say, we threw those pumpkins out, but I wasn't sure what exactly happened. I definitely thought it had to be linked to that person from last night, but what could he have done to make them rot like that? As far as I know, this town has never had a crime rate, seeing how small it was. I'm not sure if what happened was a minor misdemeanor, but it still happened, and stuff like that never happens here. This incident still creeps me the hell out, as it doesn't even make sense. I still never found out, and I haven't seen that person since. I'm a male, and this took place when I was around 8 at the time. It was the fall of 2005, and my mom had taken me to this small annual festival in our hometown that took place every October. It was nicknamed Ben's Pumpkin Patch. I still don't know who Ben was or why it was called that, but families would oftentimes come here and pick out pumpkins for Halloween. My mom had taken me on a Sunday afternoon to take some pictures of me playing in the hay and putting our faces in those cutouts. The place was fun. It had a few miniature rides and games for kids to play. It was around 4 p.m., and that's when I see my mom take notice of a man who seemed to be observing the scenery. I noticed this man briefly, but being so young at the time, I didn't think anything of it. He looked like a dad. He sort of just stood there, minding his own business while taking pictures of the other kids who I assumed he knew. At one point, I see him turn towards me and he attempts to snap a photo before my mom walks into frame. For some reason, I remember her going up to the man and aggressively confronting him. At the time, I obviously didn't care or know what it was about, but I see she's arguing with him while trying to get his camera. This got the attention of other parents as well, who came to my mother's aid, questioning as to what was happening. My mom immediately tells them that he's taking inappropriate pictures of children, which ultimately caused chaos. Thankfully, there was a police officer on duty who happened to be patrolling the venue when he had approached the man. The officer confiscated his camera, and there was no way the man was just going to take it from him. At this point, I started to feel a little uncomfortable about it, but not enough to where I wanted to leave. After a good minute of inspecting the camera, I see the officer cuff the man where he was then escorted out. My mom had took me and ran back to the car with me. I remember being disappointed about it, but I didn't make a fuss about it or cause a scene. It wasn't until 10 years later where my mom had told me something I didn't know. Apparently, this guy had taken several pictures of the children zoomed in. I won't say what they were zoomed into, but you get the idea. It was honestly the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of someone doing. The only reason he didn't get a photo of me was because my mom had thankfully noticed and stepped into frame. I thank her for that till this day, for protecting me as a son. Of course, as I became older, I became a little more wise as to what actually happened. Nowadays, I feel like mothers have this special sense when it comes to their children. The types of people you don't want to mess with. Thank you, Mom, for being the best there could be, and screw that guy for trying to get involved with kids. For context, I'm a female, and this took place when I was 10 during the fall of 1985. My family and I were going on a road trip to visit my extended family in the Carolinas for Halloween. We left early to get there by noon or less. It is a very long and boring trip there, but the views of the mountain range were nice and you'd occasionally come across a deer at some point. We lived in Georgia at the time, which was another world during the fall, and your eyes would be filled with that vibrant color of orange and brown wherever you went. Anyway, we're about halfway through the drive, about to hit South Carolina, when I see a sign for a pumpkin patch. Me, being the invested kid I was, asked my parents if we could stop and pick out pumpkins. I could tell that they were annoyed at the idea, but we could all use a rest, and they did as asked. The pumpkin patch wasn't anything too big. It was just a small field with a few pumpkins along with a sign that read, "Pick your own pumpkins." However, when we got out of the car, we didn't see anyone around. There was just the field and a small shack that looked empty. We all walk forward to the patch and see that the pumpkins were beginning to rot away, covered in flies. The weirdest thing about this was that there had been several crows drop dead on the ground. There was no blood or anything, so I figured that they had to have died from poisoning. We all had to cover our noses due to the smell, and that's when my dad starts having these abnormal symptoms. At first it was just coughs, but then it got worse. He claimed that his head was numb, and not long after he began to vomit tremendously, as well as my mom. Even when we all got away from the pumpkins, it seemed to have gotten worse. At this point, my parents started heating up, which was strange as it was chilly out. It's safe to assume that whatever was causing this had to be coming from those pumpkins. Long story short, we get back in the car and drive off with our symptoms finally getting better. There was even a point where we were deciding to stop by a hospital. We told the story to our relatives when we got there, only to get shocked looks. One of my cousins began to talk about how it could have been paranormal related, but I've never fully thought of that. However, it's definitely possible. Whatever was causing us to become sick is still a mystery till this day. All I know is there's definitely something wrong with those pumpkins.